Hello and welcome to episode 21 of the Aquarist podcast. I'm your host, Randy Reed. Yes, we are diverging from the canned intro for a quick shout out to a listener. A few days ago, I had the opportunity to meet Brandon from here in the Seattle area at the Aquarium Co-op. It was great to talk with someone that is a fan of the show, but to really make the experience that much better, Brandon was picking up a Shodentai puffer, or the Congo spotted puffer. Some of you may already know this, but I am the proud owner of a Shodentai puffer for about 2 months now. These little buddies are amazing fish, and I can't recommend them enough. So much so that I was trying to sell another co-op customer to buy one. So Brandon, if you're listening, reach out to me and let me know how your puffer's doing. If you're enjoying this podcast, please rate, review, and share this podcast to all of your fish nerd friends. Now, on to the interview. Today's date is Wednesday, June 20th, 2018. My guest today is Matthew Grant. Matthew is the owner of Printed Reefing Solutions, an online retailer of 3D printed aquarium accessories, all designed and manufactured by Matthew. So Matthew, welcome to the Aquarist podcast.
Thank you for having me, man.
Absolutely. When I saw you on, some of the posts on the US, I think it's, I always goof this Facebook group up, but it's USA Freshwater Plants and Shrimp. Is that the group?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, all those guys, and I've already interviewed a couple guys from that group. They're probably going to give me a hard time for messing that name up. But I saw, several posts of guys that have had these really cool looking colorful corner filters and all these other, really cool looking magnetic 3D printed things. And, you dig into it a little bit and they all got it from you. And, setting up a couple new tanks, I knew that was kind of the direction I wanted to go, at least having corner mat infiltration or something in that vein. So it was very natural for me to want to reach out to you, have a conversation with you, one, to buy your product, but two, just, the sheer curiosity that I have to want to know how you got started. So before we jump into Printed Reefing Solutions, why don't you give us kind of a rundown on, your time in the aquarium hobby?
Sure. I've probably been in the saltwater side the longest, dabbled in freshwater and tropical tanks, stuff like that when I was a kid. Probably in about high school, a friend of mine got me into saltwater, and I've been in and out of saltwater since. That was probably mid-90s or so. And a lot's changed in the saltwater side, especially since then. Like I said, that's kind of been my main focus. And as of late, in the last several years, freshwater shrimp have really caught my eye, and I've started up several tanks with those and dabbled in the freshwater shrimp. So those are kind of my two home bases for the aquarium hobby.
So I'm curious, being a saltwater guy for an extended period of time, what is it in particular that made you want to keep freshwater shrimp?
Saltwater is very big and expensive, I guess you could say. Pico tanks, nano tanks, stuff like that, you don't see too much of just because the parameters bounce so much, and they're a little harder to keep stable at those smaller aquarium sizes. And freshwater shrimp, I mean, you can keep a stable 3-gallon aquarium, no problem, and the cost to get into it isn't as high as saltwater. So it's kind of a nice little change, something that keeps my interest going.
So that's very reminiscent of my conversation with Eric Martins and how he was talking about, saltwater guys, when they get into the dwarf shrimp game, especially the Caradinas, we start talking about RO water and all that stuff. Like, it's almost like second nature, and it probably seemed remedial to you, right, as far as, keeping parameters.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to say remedial, but for saltwater, I'm a big believer in researching, what you're doing, spending a lot of time asking questions and digging through information and learning. So water chemistry is really an important thing in saltwater, and you get into depth in water chemistry pretty deep when you're doing the saltwater side. So when you come to the freshwater side, you look at the parameters that you're holding, and you're kind of look at it and you're like, yeah, it's only a couple things. This is actually pretty easy compared. So, it's intuitive because we already know the water chemistry if you're deep into saltwater. So it's a pretty easy thing to step into. Eric and I have talked about that several times, and it's definitely something that saltwater guys can step into pretty quickly.
Yeah, and that was just a kind of a comparison between the two hobbies. So no offense to any of the just straight freshwater shrimp keepers out there that I called it remedial. It's you still got your work cut out for you.
Yeah, and it's a learning curve, and like I said, we just on the saltwater side, that learning curve was much steeper and much deeper into chemistry. So you kind of surpass what you need for the freshwater side. So when you step back to the freshwater, you're like, oh, okay, these are kind of, as you'd say, kind of back to the basics on some of the water. So it makes it pretty simple.
So then, what were some of your first freshwater shrimp that you kept?
I like I said, I like to do my research, and also I started with the Neocaridinians, something a little simpler, just to make sure that I kind of got my feet wet, if you say. Setting up a tank and making sure that I kind of understood how the shrimp behaved and what they needed, and then kind of just evolved from there, and then started setting up the Caridinia tanks and keeping some of the more difficult Caridinia to kind of I like to constantly, I guess, push myself to keep learning new techniques or new filtrations or, new setups just to see what's out there and see how they work for me.
Oh, very cool. So then walk me through, what is your current fish room what does your current fish room look like? And feel free to include your saltwater tanks.
Right now it looks like a giant mess, Randy. My wife and I, we just moved into a house last October, and it's been a probably 60% remodel on the main floor. So my saltwater tank isn't even set up yet. It's in one of those 120-gallon Rubbermaid tanks down here in the basement. And then my shrimp racks and stuff like that are just kind of down here in the basement with me, and it's a Frankenstein setup for a while.
How many shrimp tanks do you have right now?
Let's see. I have 5 main ones that I keep right now. I have other tanks that are dry, do all the moving and everything, and then I keep one at work myself. I have one on my desk at work, and then for my day job. And then I have a 180-gallon saltwater tank that will be set up once the remodeling is all done.
Awesome. And then to kind of walk through your 5 main shrimp tanks that you have, I guess what size are those and what kind of shrimp are you keeping in there?
Mainly 10 gallons, just to keep it simple. I keep red Rileys or Reilly's, however you like to pronounce that. I got a mixed cherry tank. I have a PRL line, some old orange eye blue tigers from Eric, and then I've got a mixed Caridinia tank with some like galaxies and blue bolts and red lines and stuff like that, and it's kind of an experimental tank.
And PRL stands for, or is it PLR?
PRLs, pure red lines. So they're a crystal red shrimp that just breed true.
Oh, cool. Very cool. And so then I'm very curious about the tank that you have at work now. Are you self-employed or are you working for an employer?
I work for an employer.
Okay. And then your local facilities guys, they're not giving you a hard time for having an aquarium?
No, actually, it's kind of funny. I'm actually a plant engineer by day. And at my desk, I keep a tangerine tiger tank, just a small kind of 3-gallon tank on the desk. And everybody gets a kick out of it at work. They like coming in and checking it out. And they're just kind of, they kind of shake their head when they see these tiny little shrimp swimming around, kind of something different for them. But my day job is we deal with wastewater treatment. So we do, one of our products that most people would know is chlorine tablets for your pool. We manufacture those. So we basically manufacture everything to kill anything biological in water.
Oh, very nice. So that's a nice contrast. You have this kind of, thriving little 3-gallon on your desk, surrounded in a vast wasteland of everything that wants to kill it. Exactly.
Yeah, it's kind of ironic, I guess you could say.
Have you won over any of your coworkers that were like, man, Matthew, at first I didn't know what to think of your tank, but now I want you to come to my house and set one of these up. Do you have any of those fun stories to share?
I had one guy that was he was interested in setting up a little tank. wasn't too keen on it at first, and I gave him a tank that I had, He set it up on his desk, and we put some just some cherry shrimp in there, keep it simple. And he really got into it. So, his tank's doing pretty well, and it was kind of a neat little thing. Most of the other people aren't as interested in it, but I had one.
Awesome. Well, good on you, Matthew, for getting the one, and hopefully he gets one more, and it just continues to spread, and keep working at those other coworkers, and maybe they'll come around. And the reason I asked if your facilities manager or your facilities team got on your case, I had a coworker who is in a remote global location, and he had told me that he set up, I think, probably a small 3-gallon shrimp tank on his desk, and the facilities came around and told him he had to tear it down because it was glass, water, and electricity. So kind of a bummer that he couldn't have his little shrimp tank on his desk, which is very unfortunate.
Yeah, it's kind of a bummer. It does give me those kind of couple moments when I can kind of relax and just stare into the tank and see what's going on. So a little bit of a stress reliever. It makes a big difference for me at work. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, who doesn't want to just sit there and watch the little shrimp do their thing? I mean, they're fascinating little creatures for certain.
Yeah, and that's probably my most watched tank, because since I spend most of the time sitting in front of it. So.
All right, Matthew, so you've already alluded to it that for your professional experience, you are a plant engineer for a company that manufactures chlorine tablets for pools. So I guess, how do you leverage your professional experience, and how did Printed Reefing Solutions come along?
Yeah, so it's kind of actually intertwined. We're a little bit of I wouldn't say a smaller company, mid-sized company. My boss that I currently work for is very, likes to be on the edge of technology. And when 3D printers started becoming more and more available to the home consumer and started pushing in the market, he, approached me and said, hey, why don't we start taking a look into this? So, I researched, and we were looking at bigger units, Stratasys systems that were 80,000 plus. And for what we were doing, I just couldn't justify spending that kind of money on something that we didn't know what we were really going to use it for. So I kind of looked around a little more, found some desktop units that were, much more in the budget range, and pitched the idea of saying, hey, let's just put one on one of our desks and give it a try, just a small one. We'll just start learning. And he pulled out his credit card and walked into his office and ordered it, and had it delivered to me. So, I had one at work that I started playing with.
Awesome. And did you already have 3D modeling and CAD skills before you bought the printer, or is it something that you learned on your own?
Yeah, so my background is actually in manufacturing engineering, design engineering. So previous to this job, I did a lot of custom OEM manufacturing equipment. So this was one-off stuff designed from the ground up. So I became very fluent in design concepts and learning how to build things that were easier to manufacture and not just aesthetically pleasing, kind of a combination of the two. So I'm fluent in SolidWorks, which is a 3D modeling software, which goes hand in hand. It's probably the biggest thing that getting into 3D printing that people probably have a hurdle on is the software side. You get a 3D printer, you put it on your desk, and you're like, hey, this is pretty cool. Then you realize that you can only print what other people have already designed without the software. So, and decent software is fairly pricey out there. There are some free packages that kind of limited range on what you can do, but you realize when you really want to start designing stuff that the software package is the hurdle that most people are missing.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, I remember from one of my business courses, we had to, come up with a new product idea and, mock up very rough diagrams of, images and sketches of what this thing would be. And so we had this genius idea that we would use the free Google 3D printing, or not printing, I'm sorry, the 3D modeling software to basically make this, two rectangular planes that were kind of joined together on a perpendicular to represent our product. And, these are, we're all guys that are, beyond undergrad. So we're grad students, and none of us could figure out how to do it. So you would think that it was very simple to create a 3D rectangle, two 3D rectangles, and put them together, but it's fairly complicated, at least for us.
I've been, CAD is my background. I've been doing CAD since high school. Every job I've done is some type of CAD or modeling. So it's it's a second language to me, really. So it's very easy for me to go through designs and design for that. I think the biggest difficulty in product design, especially with 3D printers, is that being able to design a product that is functional for customers and aesthetically pleasing. But 3D printers have characteristics about their production and manufacturing that lend to better designs or different designing aspects to them. So, from if you were machining parts on a CNC versus making parts on a 3D printer, or even molding parts, or things like that. Different processes require different designing aspects, different designing mentalities or approaches when you're laying those out. So it's something that it comes a little more natural to me because I've been doing it long enough. But I can definitely see when I talk to people with 3D printers and stuff. They tend to ask a lot of questions. Well, how do you do this? How do you do that? How do you keep yours from doing this? So on and so forth. So it can definitely be hurdles for people when they get into them. So.
Yeah, I'm all about specialization of labor. I've specialized in one type of skill set. You've clearly specialized in another. And if I were to go and try to learn 3D printing, not to say that people shouldn't explore if you have a passion for it, but I have resigned the fact that there are others like yourself who have already had the schooling and have the work experience that can take these concepts and actually make them something without wasting a lot of resources, right? I would just waste mountains and heaps of times to try to even come up to a we'll use the term remedial level compared to where you're already at. So I will gladly shut up and give you money to for the finished product that you've already designed and tested and created. So I'm curious, for your manufacturing company, what are, I don't know if you can say, but like, what are some of the 3D printed objects that you've printed, and how have they been applied to your manufacturing?
For my day job?
Yeah, for your day job, yeah. I mean, because I'm thinking like from a robustness standpoint, like I just picture, machineries and production runs, and I don't see where like the printed material comes into play, how those two intersect, I guess. So like what kind of application?
Sure. It's kind of interesting. That's what we got one, and we didn't quite know. Well, what are we really going to use this for? For us, because we're manufacturing, prototyping really isn't. It doesn't necessarily benefit us. We don't do a lot of prototyping, so that didn't lend itself to us having a 3D printer. Once we had it, what I noticed was that we could start building replacement parts that were longer lead times or unique. For example, like templates or what we would call nests or fixtures, guide rails, especially shapes that can do stuff. What we found is that the ABS plastic is actually really stable in our environment because we're in a chlorine, a very corrosive environment. Metals, corrode, stainless steel corrodes, aluminum oxidizes, copper dissolves almost in the air, so electronics are a pain. But we found that ABS is extremely stable in that environment, and it's kind of lend itself into a little bit of a niche. We don't use it real highly, but it does come in handy. And for spending the amount of money we did for a small desktop unit, it's actually been quite beneficial for us.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I know from my experience in supply chain and working directly with manufacturing that the last thing you want is for a piece of support equipment to go down that prevents you from actually shipping customer orders. And then that part in and of itself has a very, very long lead time, right? So now it's kind of this, what's the expression? Dollar chasing a dime or a dime chasing a dollar. I think I'm goofing up that expression, so I apologize to everybody out there. But that's really cool how you've been able to leverage the 3D printer at work. So let's talk then. All right, so you're using this thing at work, and when does the light bulb click that hey man, this thing could start kicking out some product for my home aquarium?
Yeah, so obviously I got it at work, and it's got some free time for me to, the boss has given me permission to go ahead and just print, play, learn, because the only way you're going to be able to learn is by doing. So, being a saltwater guy, our filtration systems are usually fairly complicated, and everybody likes to do everything unique, different. Everybody's setup is different from everybody else's. So you get into, well, I need a bracket, or I need something to hold this, or I need something to lift this higher, or, all kinds of little brackets and needs. So, I started printing, like a line holder that I needed for my dosing lines. And I was absolutely tired of digging through my boxes of test kits. This one wasn't clean, or, this one spilled, or I couldn't find this one. And the test kit organizers were one of the first things that I actually designed. Took it home, laid them out, and it was amazing to me the difference that it made for me in testing. Because one of the things, I'm not, like most people, I'm not a big tester of water. I don't want to sit there and test every day or every week. That's something that's not all that fun. But once I organized it and I had everything ready to go, I cut my test time down into like 5-10 minutes that I could throw all my tests and run through them. And then when I was done, everything was, rinsed and cleaned and set back up. Oh my gosh, I was like, this is ridiculous. So, I kind of showed some of the guys in our local club that I'm friends with, and talk to them, show them some stuff, and they're like, "Oh man, that's pretty cool." He goes, that's when it started rolling. It was like, "Can you make me one? Can you make me this? Can you make me that?" And it started to kind of grow through that. And then in the saltwater side, we do. I don't know if you're familiar with frag swaps. Our clubs typically put together these small kind of swap meets once or twice a year in their area to have vendors come in and sell corals and fish and stuff like that aren't in the local markets. And our club was like, man, you need to get a booth this year and bring some product and sell some stuff. So I ended up doing that, and I got a really good, a really good draw, and it again just kind of carried on from there.
Yeah, that is such a great story. And how long now have you been actually printing aquarium-related products?
So I've been pretty much selling for the last 3 years. Be about 3 years this fall, yeah.
Okay, and then initially, just from your experience with the material and kind of your background in engineering and dealing with different types of materials and metals, you already knew that the 3D printed material you're using was going to be safe for both the saltwater and the freshwater aquariums?
Yeah, I did do some research because as far as additives and things like that, it's ABS, and it should be nearly 100% ABS. A lot of these manufacturers won't necessarily really release exactly what's in them. So I had to do some researching and do some testing myself, and I haven't come across any ill effects on anything. As you know, some of the tougher corals in the saltwater side are called SPS, which are stony, small polyp stonies, that are really particular about water quality and any light quality, and any little thing in the water can really affect them, even more so than some of these more rare shrimp. So I've had some of my coral frag racks that I've had, and I grew out these corals on these frag racks to make sure, hey, if these sensitive corals are going to be okay with it, then I don't have a problem recommending them. And I had some of these corals actually growing on the plastic. So, I can't say, unfortunately, I can't say with 100% certainty that there is nothing that isn't maybe a little harmful in the plastic, but from all the research that I have found and the research that I've done on my own, I have had zero ill effects that I've ever seen. So,
And you've been at this for 3 years now. I mean, I don't even want to fathom a guess of how many of these various pieces of aquarium equipment you've moved across the country, maybe even globally. And I would assume then you've had no feedback from customers then that are like, hey, man, I think you need to pull this product because I just had an entire tank wipe out.
Yeah, exactly. One of the biggest question I have in my product line is, and I'm always open to talk about it, is the magnets. In the freshwater side, I just haven't had a problem with those magnets in freshwater. Freshwater isn't corrosive enough to really bother them. But in the saltwater side, I don't care how well you protect metal in the saltwater side, metal is going to corrode eventually. So it's always my biggest question, and I'm always free to talk about it, because basically what I'm going to tell people is that you're putting metal in your tank. It's an understanding that you are putting metal in your tank. I've found the most protected metal I could find as far as magnets, but there is the possibility that it will rust over time. And what I have seen from my experience is that a lot of these companies have tried to protect their magnets so much that they've completely encased them with all this plastic or acrylic. But most of these materials are hygroscopic, and they'll actually begin to what they call hydrolyze and absorb water into the plastic itself. So eventually it gets to the magnet, and then it corrodes that magnet, which is completely hidden from the eye inside, and it corrodes and it corrodes and it corrodes until it actually explodes open, breaks open the plastic. And what I have seen is that's when tanks crash, because you get this huge dose of, release of iron into the system all at once. So from a product design, going into this, I sat back and I'm like, okay, I'm going to put metal in the tank. What's my approach? I'm going to keep this in my tank, and I'm very protective of my tank myself. So I decided, well, I'm not going to hide the magnet. I'm just going to leave it out. So that's kind of my biggest question I usually get is, how come you don't hide the magnet, or why you should encase this to protect it? And the reason that I don't is so that it visually, you can see that if something's going wrong, it's not hidden from your eye or waiting to explode. The other side of it is that because it's not hidden, it doesn't corrode. If it starts to corrode for any reason, like somebody scratches it or nicks it and then it starts to corrode, it starts off really slow, and that iron release into the tank isn't this explosion. So you may start to get a little bit of algae or something as a result of it, but I haven't had anybody, say, oh, you crashed my tank, or, my tank just went into a heavy decline because of it. I've had one rust in mine, and I haven't had those ill effects. So I'm very watchful of as you kind of mentioned, the products that I'm using and putting in the tanks, because I use them in mine first, and I keep some higher end stuff. So I don't want to destroy my own stuff as would be.
Yeah, no, that's great, and I think it's really coming through in just how you're talking about this subject that. You are a passionate hobbyist first, and that you want, everyone in the hobby that you're interacting with through Printed Reefing Solutions to have a good experience, not just with your product, but also just in the hobby in general. So the last thing that it sounds like you want to do, and because this is kind of a side fun gig for you, is to sell them a product that is going to ruin their experience, and that, you've used yourself as the guinea pig. And I mean, you've put a ton of thought into, your magnet selection and, encasing or leaving exposed. So I think that's just a huge kudos. That's awesome. Your customer focus is just really, really coming through. And I can say from my experience that, you do have exceptional customer service, and that, we can talk about that in just a little bit, but I'm incredibly satisfied with my interactions with you so far. But I do want to go back and talk about the API Combo Organizer, because I absolutely want to second that and say that test kit is awesome, right? But that thing is such a pain in the butt to pull out. Like, half the time you go to grab the plastic lid and maybe you get the base and then it slips out of your hands, and you've got test tubes and cards and everything is just everywhere. I didn't order that from you, but I need to go back and actually order that thing, because that API, the master water test kit, That organizer that I'm looking at right now, that thing is sweet. And it's one of those things where if just setting it up or just getting it out is a pain in the butt, you're that much less likely to actually to want to test your water. And I know people are like, well, that, that shouldn't be an excuse, but it is, right? It's a reality. We all are strapped for time. And if it's just one more layer of something that we have to deal with, like I know logging on to my, to my computer, if I want to go onto the network, if I'm at home, I have to pull out my VPN token and I have to, use the private network to get in or the private access to get into my network. And that in and of itself is a pain in the butt. And I may not log on to my computer that night just because I don't want to go in my backpack and pull out my token and have to log on. It's just that extra layer that, I'll do it tomorrow morning.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's kind of funny, the test kits that, as when you get into saltwater and stuff, you start to test your alkalinity and calcium and magnesium, and these are titrations that take a little bit longer. And basically, to make it simple, what I'd had my organizer set up on a little desk that I had, and I kept one little tub, like Rubbermaid or a Tupperware tub of just some RO water in it, and then another one that I dumped out my reagents when I was done with them. So, I'd pull a clean test tube off the rack, which was sitting right there. I'd do my test, dump it in the one that took the reagent, dip it into the RO one, shake it up, clean it up a little bit, dump it into the waste one again, and then set it on the drying rack. So, in a matter of, 5-10 seconds, I cleaned the test tube and it was ready to go for next time every time. And that's my biggest time saver right there.
Yeah, I feel like with your experience and my experience in supply chain, I feel like we might have crossed paths in a different life, with especially you and your tooling engineering. But I already feel like you've got the gears turning of the continuous improvement, lean manufacturing, 5S. I feel like it's already churning in your head. As you set up your own room, like you want to eliminate every wasteful step possible. And a huge part of 5S, which I don't even want to go down that tangent for folks what that is, but it's basically you want to have everything in the place where it needs to be, organized, ready to go, so it's always repeatable, right? And the more repeatable you make it, the less likely you are to make a mistake or to lose something. So yeah, but we don't want to go.
What you need, where you need it, and ready to go when you need it.
Exactly. But now that sounds too much like work, and I don't want to talk about that. So, all right. So
I got, and just to touch on that, I mean, my engineering background, I do have Lean Six Sigma background too, so that does play a part in how my mind thinks. So.
Oh, there you go. Awesome. Yeah, we probably have way too many things in common then from a work perspective. All right, Matthew, so let's talk about then your filters, right? So I actually went ahead and placed an order with you for a magnetic corner filter. And so what led you to going down the path then of the filtration? Was it your idea? Was it something that a customer of like your organizer kit, that they came to you and said, hey, you need to start making corner matin filters?
No, I always dig into my research. I started setting up shrimp tanks a while back, and filtration from the saltwater side, again, filtration's a big deal. We spend a lot of time and money on our filtration systems, even though they're mostly hidden. But a lot of push in the recent years for saltwater is to make your sump systems pretty. LEDs, colored acrylics, making it glow, making it something that you can show off, and not just an eyesore under the tank or downstairs in the basement. And that kind of played a little bit into the shrimp side. Looking at the corner filters, sponge filter setups, I didn't really see anything that I liked or thought that was aesthetically pleasing for the tank. It's cheap. You can buy the sponge filters for about $10 or whatever. Or you can buy some sponge and an uplift tube and put them across the end wall of your tank, stuff like that. But for me, it just wasn't aesthetically pleasing. I wanted a tank that was kind of nice. So, I just started thinking about ways to improve that and come up with my own design. And from my own design and my own aquariums, it kind of evolved into a product. So that's kind of typically where most of my products roll from, is my own use, my own need, or from talking to, I talk to a lot of people in the hobby, in different clubs, and I'd go to different shows for the saltwater side and freshwater side, and I talk to people, and they tell me, hey, I need this. You should make this. You should design something that can do this, and I think through all, I take everybody's suggestion and keep it a mental note or write them down when I get home so that they're on the drawing board. I may not get to them, but I have a lot of things on the drawing board. I can definitely tell you that.
So I guess just kind of swag, right? Like, so once somebody gives you an idea, or we'll use this magnet, or not even the magnetic one, but just your first iteration of corner HMF filter. You're like, all right, Matthew, I need to go ahead and make this. Roughly how many iterations and how many design hours do you think went into the first viable product?
It's a good question. I don't necessarily track my hours. I tend to spend, the filter will say, probably a good 40, 80 hours in design time that I probably got in those filters. Tweaking most of the filter body, that wasn't too big a deal. Design comes a little more natural to me, so that kind of stuff plays out pretty quickly in my head. The uplift tube, you got a powered one, so you don't have the air uplift tube. But the air uplift tube that I designed is designed to make the flow out of the uplift tube keep from burping, so it's like a constant flow, and it doesn't release a lot of air across the water surface, so it actually releases the air inside the chamber before it spills out the spout. So I put a lot of thought and time into that and designing that so that I could print it. That's the other side of all this is I can design all kinds of stuff, but when you go to put it in the printer and go to print it, especially ABS with its tendency to warp, can be problematic to print parts repetitively and get it to look the same every time. So, like I said, I probably got about 40 to 80 hours in just the uplift tube itself.
Wow, that is a lot of design time, and I'm sure that if somebody were to contract you out to do something like that, your rate, design engineering, 3D modeling rates are they're probably fairly pricey. So you've already invested quite a bit of your own personal time into this, and which to me means that when you pass it along to the consumers or what you list these at, knowing just how much thought, and even with that uplift tube, working to eliminate that gurgling or to try to reduce that noise as much as possible. To me, that definitely is something that adds to the value of that product and just justifies what your asking price is. So how many iterations, I guess how many prototypes did you print out and were like, no, is there a pile of 10 of them somewhere in the corner, or did you nail it? Did you nail it on the first printing?
No, I probably got about I probably had about 4 or 5 of those uplift tubes. I had a really good idea of what I wanted the design to look like, and it probably took me about 4 or 5 iterations to get it to print the way I wanted and function the way I wanted. I've actually tried some iterations since then that I tried playing with the spout design and things like that, because I listen to the feedback when people are talking, and they want to, it'd be nice if you could do this or that, and I actually, like I said, I take those considerations in, and I go home and I see if I can do that kind of stuff. And I've tried flattening the nozzle so that it looked more widespread and not round. I tried lowering it so it wasn't sitting at as high, but the flow and the way that the air separates from the water in the spout just doesn't work if I start to change that design. And the feedback that I've gotten from most people, especially with the air uplift tube, is that it outperforms anything that they've purchased or made themselves usually. It's got some pretty good flow to them. I actually have to regulate mine down just on my 10-gallon tanks, otherwise I got too much flow going. And that's just with the air uplift tubes. So I'm kind of proud, I'm kind of proud of that. I mean, that's when I get the feedback that people are like, yeah, I got to turn it down. This has got great flow, when I get that kind of feedback, that makes me happy. So
No, that's awesome, and you absolutely should be proud. I mean, I could tell you right now, if I designed and printed and made something that awesome, I would be super proud. So, kudos to you, Matthew, on that and making that product available. And customers are having a fantastic experience with it. And so, you also talked about the aesthetics, right? Like you wanted something aesthetically pleasing, and we didn't touch on this yet, but you offer a few different colors, right?
Yeah, mostly my 8 standard colors that I do, but black and white, and then from the saltwater side, we like bright colors. So, you got the fluorescent orange and green and yellow and blue. I got purple and red. I got the basic color rainbow spectrum. Most people go with the black. It hides with the filter, kind of disappears into the corner, not as noticeable. But, I do get people that do enjoy putting some color in the tank. So.
I like that you called it kind of your basic 8 colors, because I think in this hobby, right, like we're so used to just buying the one product offering of a given filter, and there is no color choice. There is no, nobody even thinks that color is an option, and yet here you are offering 8 different color options for these various products. And it's not just the corner filters, right, that you offer the colors. It's we haven't talked about them yet, but the magnetic moss ledges, the boost ledges,
Yep.
And even your test kit organizers, right? Those are all available in your color offerings. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, actually, the moss ledges, I do like a dark green and a black. Those are my standard colors. I haven't had anybody actually ask for them in color, and I think that most people in the planted tank world and shrimp world that use those moss ledges, most of them, the feedback I've gotten is they don't want them to show through the plants. You're trying to actually kind of just give the plant a base and not necessarily take the focus away from the plant. So the feedback I've gotten is that most people don't like the colors on those, but that's probably the only product offering that I don't. And I've done custom colors where people have said, I've done some hot pink, stuff like that. People wanted something a little bit different or a particular color for a particular reason. And usually I got to upcharge just because I got to order that color in for that specific order. But, I'm usually happy to, try to keep the cost down. And I look at it as, well, I'm buying another color. So if I have a need for it, then I have it now. And I try not to pass too much of that along to the customer. So like I said, I'm into the hobby, and I enjoy people enjoying my product. So that's the biggest deal for me.
But if a crazy shrimp guy came along and said he wanted a hot pink boost ledge, would you make him a hot pink boost ledge if you had it around?
Oh yeah.
So.
Oh yeah. Well, I don't have. There's a couple items that I don't have on my website that people know about, and one of them's called the bagging station for guys that are selling shrimp. It's a little kind of stand that holds the bag so that you can pour the water in and add the shrimp, and it holds the nets and some pins and the bags and rubber bands. It's a little organizer for that. And I had one gentleman, he absolutely needed hot pink, so I made him one in hot pink.
That is fantastic. Now I don't need that, but now that you're telling me it's not even available on your website for me to order, I feel like I need that now, Matthew. So you just by holding out on us, right? Like I think everybody wants that now.
Yeah, I do have. I've got some products in that I just haven't really released yet, hardcore. And I've been busy, which is a good thing. And but it's limited me. I only have so much time with my day job and trying to do it at night. So I try to push as much as I can, but eventually I hit a wall. So.
Yeah, definitely. And you've got a very large product offering already that you do have available on here. Like I had already said, you have a variety of the corner filters. You have standard corner filters. You've got magnetic corner filters, minis, normal size. You've got moss ledges, boost ledges. We already talked about the organizer racks. You have feeding zones, retaining walls. I thought one was really cool that I didn't see before this. I was actually just perusing your site again. Float switch bracket kits. So I'm guessing that's for guys that maybe they run sumps or they run a sump system and they don't want to potentially prevent the overflow scenario, right? So they have the kill switches on the floats.
Yeah, correct. Like auto top off systems or For example, like my sump has 3 float switches on them, so that if the sump starts to fill, I know my return pump failed, and we usually, like Apex controllers and things like that run our tanks, it actually emails me and tells me my high limit switch is on, so I know that my pump has failed, or my low level switch is on, which means my auto top off ran out and I forgot to fill the dang thing. Things like that.
Yeah, so I mean, you've really, leveraged your experience in the hobby to create products that are available for people, but also, like you said before, your customers where, I see right here your Apex controller bracket. I mean, you've got a ton of like really cool product offerings on here. Apex auto feeder bracket. I could have fun just going through here for the next like 5 minutes and just listing off all of these really cool products, line holders that you've already talked about, more controller brackets for a different brand. Really, really cool. And so, have you recently received any requests from customers?
Yeah, I've got some requests. A little more difficult on the products that I've been working on. I won't really say offhand, but I'm working with a product with Eric Martin's actually. He's kind of come to me with a product that he wants. I've got another gentleman that I'm working with a product that he's wanting to move. That are good ideas, and I really like them. So I'm working through those with those guys. And like I said, I do have a list of suggestions that people have given me, and I've definitely been working through them. I kind of have to weight them where, I'm kind of thinking, okay, well, how many people really want this product versus this one? And that's kind of how I try to put them in order. As I think that there's how much of a need out there does this product have? I don't want to make a product that only, 5 or 6 guys are going to need. I'm more than willing to make that product for that person if they need it, which I have a couple times actually. Custom stuff, one-off stuff, guys that just need something special, and I'm more than happy to do that. So yeah, it's a long list. I can definitely tell you that.
So, and you don't have to say what the product idea was, or, definitely not who the person was, but just a simple yes or no. Has anybody ever submitted a request to you that was just so utterly ridiculous you had to shake your head and just walk away?
Not really. Most of the suggestions most people have come up with, they're usually looking for some usefulness. They really do have a useful purpose to them. So, I do look at, when I do get suggestions and things like that, I do research the market and see if other people have already put a product out there or something that's very similar. I guess it's just my personality. I don't like to put a product out there that already exists unless I have what I feel is a distinct design advantage to it or purpose to it. I know that there's, Chaz puts out moss ledges. So it was a concern of mine when I did decide that I wanted to build some moss ledges that I made sure that mine was extremely different from his. It's a suction cup. Mine are magnetic. His are, grid pattern. Mine are cone shape. Mine are angled down, things like that. So my considerations are not to put a product out that's competing against something that's in the market. But that my product has a usefulness, number one, a design appeal to it that people will like, and that I'm not stepping on something that's already out there.
Yeah, no, that's very, very thoughtful because you are definitely serving a very niche market, right? And, there's already so few, I don't want to say so few customers, but, you're not hitting the hang on back aqua clear market. You're serving something much more specialized and a much more involved hobbyist. So I can totally appreciate your approach to that.
Yeah, that's just the kind of line I draw, and I'm not looking to quit my day job and take this. It'd be nice if it grew like that, but I don't see it growing with the 3D capabilities. It is scalable to a point, but I think that I sit more in a niche market where I provide an array of colors that, like, blow molders aren't going to come and steal my product and produce them in 8 different colors. They're just not going to do that. There's not enough volume, for them to compete against that. so that my color range and my design twists, I think, keep me in that niche. I don't think that I'll be selling millions of them by any means, but I've been actually pretty impressed with how many HMF filters that I've sold. That's been one of my biggest sellers. So that one kind of took me a little by surprise at how well that one did.
Matthew, that is an awesome segue because I want to wrap this conversation up with talking about my experience with the HMF filter. So a little background, I had a 20 long tank that I needed to get set up and get ready and all cycled and ready to roll for some Chillerthenas from Gary Lang, who in the month of June, a couple weeks ago, spoke at the Greater Seattle Aquarium Society. I was able to pre-order some Chillerthena rainbow fish, super awesome fish, 2 pair of them, 2 breeding pairs, and I needed a tank for them. And I knew that for this particular tank, I absolutely wanted to go with an HMF filter. I didn't know I wanted a corner filter, but I knew I wanted an HMF filter because I was going to be pulling mops out of, and I just wanted it to be a very clean, very streamlined tank, maybe a little planted, but my whole approach was I don't want to have to deal with if I ever need to fish these guys out or fish out the mops, tangling up with cords and air lines and all that fun stuff, and sponge filters flying everywhere. So I just wanted something static, in place, very clean. And that's when, going through that Facebook group, I saw, various posts, and I think a couple of the posts actually, the guys had very, very colorful, like the real bright lime green filters, and that instantly caught my eye, and I'm like, what is going on here? Who is making this product? And that's when I found you, and I'm like, I need to contact you. I need to get this corner filter ASAP so I can get this tank set up. So when I placed my order with you, it was actually kind of custom, right? Like you asked me, hey, am I going to have gravel? What depth of bed am I going to go with? I kind of blew your mind because I told you I wanted a 4-inch kind of, I was going to have like a 4-inch bed in the back, which I probably could have gone 3 inches, but nonetheless, like this custom experience where you were able to customize that filter for me instead of using an air pump with the uplifter, which I'm kind of regretting not getting now, after hearing you talk about how much time and effort and the performance you're getting out of that. But I ended up going with a powered solution, so I'm using a pump for the return, and you've got a really cool return nozzle on there. And I went with the magnetic option so that I didn't have to silicone anything in place or use some other means to keep it in place. So when it arrived, and I mean, you turned it, I think you turned it fairly quickly. I think there might have been a family vacation, but nonetheless, like, knowing that I'm buying from a hobbyist, right? Like completely within my expectations, the filter arrived, I go to install it, and I don't know what it was about my tank configuration or whatnot, but the fit on it just wasn't, the magnetic fit on it wasn't as tight as what I thought it was going to be. Do you have any, like, I guess what was kind of going through your mind when I had sent you that message?
Yeah, I wasn't sure because you were trying to explain it, and I'm like, man, why is this not fitting? I wasn't quite, I usually inspect all my filters before I send them just to make sure that there's nothing, silly going on. And you were saying you were having problems, and I'm like, oh, good Lord, what's going on with your filter? I haven't had one really with a fit problem. And to top it off, you messaged me about the pump failed to work right out of the box.
Yeah, which honestly, like for what it's worth, I didn't even know it came with a pump. Like that was an added bonus. I already had a pump ready to go, so that I didn't, that was no worries for me. But again, your customer service, like that was another thing where you're like, oh man, I could, like one more thing to have to deal with in terms of customer service that I'm sure you weren't feeling super awesome about.
Well, it's for me, it's just embarrassing. I want to make sure that when you get your product, it's something, I'm the same way. When I buy something and I get it at home and I'm ready to use it, I want to use it. I don't want to go, oh, it's broke. So, it's terrible when I have somebody reply to me and say, hey, I'm having issues, but I don't want anybody to not do that because the first thing I want to do is make sure that you get taken care of. So yeah, once you were telling me you were having a fit issue and I couldn't really figure out what was going on. Like it wasn't necessarily into the corner right or what. And finally I was like, you know what, between all the problems we're going to have a redo on this. So, I went ahead and made another filter and made sure that, everything was squared up as it should be. And, and got it sent out to you. And I think with a new pump and all that, so from the sounds of it, everything went smoothly on that one.
Yeah, and actually, what really surprised me is that you went, you added a middle magnet, right? So instead of having two on each side, you've now got three on each side, and they seem to be more compact and stronger. So to me, it seems like you kind of made further improved on a design that was already really good, right?
Yeah, I for some reason I wasn't sure what was going on, so I made sure that I spread those magnets, a couple extra magnets in there, and went with a little bit different design approach to try that. And I do like that design, so I may actually be going to that on some of the newer filters as I make them. I may make that change a little bit different there. So, but like I said, I'm always looking at improvement. So if there's always something that I get feedback on that pushes me to do something a little bit different, I'm going to make that change.
Yeah, and I mean, my experience with this filter is, I'm incredibly satisfied. I mean, I think I'm even more satisfied with your approach to customer service, your willingness to make sure that everything was taken care of. Like, I'm embarrassed that I even had to have you go through those extra steps because I like to try to be the easiest customer as possible. So I felt like kind of a pain in the butt for even having to drag you through that. But your response to it, though, was just absolutely phenomenal. And I can definitely say it was a pleasure doing business with you. And I really want to pick up that master test kit from you as well, because I think that thing is awesome. But I mean, this 20-gallon tank, for being a fairly bare tank, like, it just looks really clean. That corner filter in the back is super sleek. I did go with black. I didn't go with anything too extravagant, color-wise. The heater fits in perfectly back there. Everything is just dialed in on that. The rainbow fish are absolutely loving it. Pretty much by like morning one, as I'm checking the spawn after I get these things, they're already throwing eggs. So clearly the rainbow fish are happy, right? Like, they flew all the way across the country with Gary Lang from Missouri to Washington. They're in a bag for 3 days, or I'm sure Gary changed the water, but they were in a bag, maybe changed the water for 3 days. Now they're in a tank, and pretty much like the next day they're throwing eggs and breeding. So sure, rainbow fish like to do that, but nonetheless, I think that's pretty telling that they're comfortable in this tank, and I think they really do like the flow that the filter puts out.
Yeah, and that was one of your, and that's why I asked the questions, because you're buying a filter. I don't pretend that my filters are the cheapest thing out there. They're unique and they're designed to you, and that's what I want. I want a filter that's going to fit your needs, what you're keeping in your tank. If you're going to put a 4-inch substrate in there, or you're going to put a bare bottom in there, there's no reason for me not to adjust that filter so that it allows for that. Your flow, if an air uplift tube is going to do that for you and you want the extra oxygenation in the water, or in your case, the 20 long to be able to put the amount of flow to the other corner of the tank and turn a little more times on the tank because you got, fish in there instead of just shrimp, then, we're going to go with the power option. I want to be able to adjust that filter to what you need. So I think those are the tweaks that I like to make, and the extra steps that I like to take for the customers to make sure they're happy, to make sure their tanks are happy, and that when they show people their aquarium that they want to show the filter too. That makes it worthwhile for me.
Yeah, man, like I said, I can't tell you enough how satisfied I am. And I hopefully people listening to this are also, one, we've piqued their curiosity on all of these various products that you have. They want to join the club and get a corner HMF filter as well and be awesome like the Aquarist podcast and have that in one or many of their tanks. So why don't you go ahead and plug how people can get a hold of you? And I guess my next question, before I let you go, is do you ship international as well? So I know we've got listeners in Canada, we've got listeners in the UK, and listeners, all over the world for that matter. So do you ship internationally?
Yes, I do. Usually I do have something like Canada and stuff like that are set up on the website to go ahead and order. Most of the other ones, I usually have them just contact me, and I'll get some shipping rates for you just to make sure that you're comfortable with how much shipping goes. For the most part, I've seen about $20 to $40 for overseas shipping. That stays pretty basic across the board. But yeah, I will ship international. I've shipped quite a few places actually. if you want to look at the products and take a look at what my offerings are, I have a full website at www.printedreefingsolutions.com. Also, Facebook page that I try to show off some custom products and things that I do for customers on Printed Reefing Solutions on Facebook. Messaging me through Facebook is usually the easiest way to get a hold of me, or emailing me through the website. Both I look at daily and try to respond to as quickly as possible. So those are my main channels of contact.
Awesome, and I'll make sure that I include all of those in the show notes. So if anybody missed that, you just go into the show notes and we'll have those links ready to go for you. And if you do buy from Matthew, tell him the Aquarist podcast sent you. There is no additional discount. There is no commission for me, but it will give me a warm fuzzy knowing that hopefully I sent somebody else over to Matthew to get one of these awesome products that he has. So Matthew, thank you very much for joining me tonight on the Aquarist podcast. Fantastic conversation. Super pleased with your product. And you're not too bad for a saltwater guy.
I appreciate that. It was a pleasure talking to you, Randy.
All right, Matthew, you have a good night now.
You too. Thank you very much.
Thank you again for listening to the Aquarist podcast. As always, get involved in your local fish club, help grow this wonderful hobby, and have fun with other fish nerds.